32 teams in 32 days. Today's video, the Detroit Lions. Welcome to a series where we deep dive on every NFL team's offseason from the very beginning, when coaches are being hired, all the way to present day with preseason happening, with one goal: to look ahead to the 2025 season and see how each team will perform. Here's a list of videos that we're going to be dropping for 32 straight days from August 1st to September 1st. If you see a team that you're a fan of, 2, 3, 4 teams, I encourage you guys to hit that subscribe button so you can stay notified when we drop that video on their respective dates. The Hall of Fame game for the Lions happened just recently against the Chargers. We learned a lot from that, but first let's start from the very beginning with the coaching staff. The one constant in this department is Dan Campbell, 5 years, or going into his 5th season with the team. The shakeups, however, come with the offensive and defensive coordinators, which is actually a very big deal. John Morton takes place for Ben Johnson, who is now the Chicago Bears head coach, and in comes in, or at least should say he's promoted, Kelvin Shepard to DC in place of Aaron Glenn, who goes to the New York Jets. For Shepard, he was a player, now he's a defensive coordinator. He was a linebackers coach since 2021 with the Lions. Born and raised, if you want to call it that, in his coaching career with the Lions, and we expect him to have the same kind of philosophy since he was kind of coached under Aaron Glenn. So that 4-2, 4-3 base defense with aggressive blitzes, man coverage, that kind of philosophy, that kind of stays constant. However, as far as the offensive coordinator goes, John Morton comes from Denver after being with the Broncos for a couple years as a pass game specialist. This is not his first crack as offensive coordinator. He was the OC in New York for the Jets in 2017. We expect the same sort of philosophy as well, and it's more so John Morton adapting to the talent and how Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell wanted to bring in that sort of talent to have their own style of coaching. So you're still going to expect to see Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery, each of them carry the ball over 200 times this season. Very heavy passing game as well. Amon-Ra St. Brown in the slot, getting over 130, 140 targets in the passing game. Jameson Williams going to be that deep threat. Like, it's the same sort of philosophy, but nothing too crazy. We expect him to still be on the mark. Now, moving on to free agency and trades, adds and losses. Comparing the adds versus the losses, the key losses were Kevin Zeitler and Frank Ragnow on the offensive line. They're going to have to do a lot of shifting. We'll talk about that when we get to draft picks. But the losses on the defensive side is Darius Smith, Carlton Davis. It's not that major. Davis is a huge loss, but they kind of replaced him with DJ Reed and Rocky Sin, Avonte Maddox. So they're doing a lot more help with that secondary, and this is good for a defense that was ranked in the bottom 3 versus the pass last year. Against the run, solid, top 5. Pass, they needed some help, and they looked like they addressed that in free agency with the secondary. And then this didn't seem like a big signing at first, but Roy Lopez, defensive tackle, comes in clutch for a Lions team that is still recovering from some injuries that they are suffering through with that defensive line. Aleem McNeil suffered a torn ACL last year in December against the Buffalo Bills. And then unfortunately, Levi Onwuzurike is going to be out for the 2025 season with a torn ACL that he suffered in practice. But Lopez going to be working in with DJ Reader. If he doesn't get any starting time, he's going to get some rotational time, along with this man that they drafted in the first round. Pick number 28, Tyleik Williams, defensive tackle from Ohio State. At first, they drafted him just to be a rotational piece, kind of a backup, a fill-in for McNeil while he recovers and he comes back later in the season. However, with that injury to Levi Onwuzurike, there's going to have to be someone that steps up opposite of DJ Reader, whether that's Roy Lopez or Williams. That remains to be seen. I personally prefer the rookie because they drafted him high for a reason in this specific instance. Regardless, it's a lot of pressure to ask for a rookie, but he's a first-round pick. Let's see if he can handle it. Another rookie that's going to have a lot of weight on his shoulders is Tate Ratledge, the guard from Georgia. They have to fill in, like I said, for Kevin Zeitler and Frank Ragnow. For Frank Ragnow, we expect it to be Graham Glasgow because Tim Twentyman, the beat reporter for the Lions, has been saying that in training camp, it's been Glasgow that's been getting snaps at center. He doesn't expect that to change. So at right guard, Tate Ratledge is going to step up and be a starter for 2025. The 3rd round pick, Isaac TeSlaa. Please tell me you guys watched the Hall of Fame game. He's a big-bodied 6'4" receiver that can line up on the outside. However, the routes that he was running in the Hall of Fame game mimicked that of a slot receiver. There was a lot of drags. He was beating guys with his speed. And it's just a matter of time, I feel like, until someone emerges as that wide receiver 3 in this Lions offense. They're obviously going to heavily favorite Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's going to be in the slot. Jameson Williams, he's a deep threat. He's going to be on the outside. He's their number 2 guy. Tim Patrick, on the other hand, he's labeled as the wide receiver 3, but that offense just naturally, the wide receiver 3, if John Morton carries the same philosophy as Ben Johnson, only gets about 45, 50 targets in a year. It's just the main 2 guys. So it'll be interesting to see if they add in that element of a wide receiver 3, how that's going to affect the rest of the offense, how they're going to operate, because TeSlaa, if you saw him, looked amazing. If an injury would occur to Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, he's someone that can have an immediate impact for the Lions, just the way that this offense is set up. And just don't take my word for it. In the war room, Dan Campbell, before they drafted him, said the same thing. And then the rest of the draft pick, they're just added depth. Dominic Lovett, we saw him a little bit on special teams, a Hall of Fame game, lined up as a kick returner. But pretty much to sum up this draft pick, these draft picks, it's just damage control. With the injuries that they had, the losses that they had with retirement and free agency, it's damage control to try to just make sure that they stay consistent, stay the same team. Moving on to the projected starters, starting with offense, it is solid as far as a starting quarterback goes. The backup quarterback, I gave the nod to Hendon Hooker momentarily. Kyle Allen, QB3. It was the other way around in the Hall of Fame game. Allen got the nod as QB2. Then Hooker, regardless, if you watch the game, both players did not look the greatest. And maybe it's just rust that they just need to shake off, and they'll get better as the season progresses. But a couple of interceptions from Allen. Hendon Hooker only threw about 18 yards, I want to say. Hopefully Goff can stay healthy for a full 17-game season, because there's a lot of questions on the QB2, who's it going to be and how well can they perform in case of a Goff injury. Moving on to skill position players, starting with the running backs, Jahmyr Gibbs. On this depth chart, I have him labeled as the starter. However, Dan Campbell, he'll probably put in David Montgomery in the first snap of the game, which technically makes him the starter because it's not a passing situation. You could be under center, I formation. Also, he's the veteran, so he's going to get the nod. However, the way I'm looking at it is, who do I feel like is going to outperform who at the position? And this is the year that Jahmyr Gibbs, regardless of Montgomery's injury status, whether he's healthy or not, this is the year that Gibbs will outperform Montgomery in almost every category. In carries, yards, touchdowns, receptions. New offensive coordinator John Morton named 3 specific players on June 5th that he wanted to rely on in this offense for 2025. Sam Laporta, Jameson Williams, and Jahmyr Gibbs. That doesn't mean that Gibbs is going to get 325, 350 carries this season. That's not how he operates. I love the dynamic of David Montgomery. He should still get his run. He should still get 200 carries or so. Moving on to the wide receivers, we know about Amon-Ra St. Brown as consistent and reliable as ever. I put him in the slot in this depth chart. Tim Patrick and Jameson Williams. We talked a little bit about Tim Patrick. They could utilize a wide receiver 3 in this offense. That remains to be seen. But Jameson Williams, on May 13th, John Morton says that Williams will have a breakout year. I thought he had a breakout year last year, but apparently John Morton expects an even bigger year. Then on May 30th, Dan Campbell says that Williams has tons of growth left. Expects a huge season, going to lean on him, and is going to be big for the Lions. And then I mentioned on June 5th how Jameson Williams, Dan Campbell says that he's one of the key players that John Morton wants to feature. So whatever you thought of him last year, expect bigger things out of him this season. And then the offensive line, we mentioned Tate Ratledge will be the right guard. Graham Glasgow is going to be the center. Penei Sewell, Theo Decker, those 2 bookends, that stays consistent. Projected starters for defense, starting with that defensive line. Aiden Hutchinson is back. He is healthy. That defensive tackle position, right now we're going to give the nod to Aleem McNeil because we're not just looking at week 1 starters. We're looking at down the road. Moving on to the linebackers, Anzalone, Campbell, Barnes, that stays consistent. Nothing changes there. And then the secondary, for the most part, it stays consistent outside of DJ Reed. He's not going to be the starting cornerback on the right side. Fills in for Carlton Davis after Davis left for free agency with the New England Patriots. And then the special teams, Jake Bates, who came from the Michigan Panthers, had a very good season last year. The only thing different here is Tom Kennedy. He was a kick returner last season, but it was just interesting to see in the Hall of Fame game. They had Dominic Lovett back there. They also had Grant Stewart, a linebacker. I guess they just wanted to experiment with things, but right now I'm just going to give the nod to the guy that had the most kick returns last season, and that was Tom Kennedy. Moving on to the projected stats for quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. The starting quarterback, Jared Goff, Very underrated. Going to have, and yet again, another solid season. Maybe his stats are going to dip just a bit because of the loss of Ben Johnson, but it's still a very good season. 4,300 yards, pretty much 4,400 yards passing, 33 passing touchdowns, 14 interceptions. No question about it. Goff is as solid as ever. And then the two running backs, Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery. Gibbs is going to be that starter because if you compare the stats, I think he's going to get the most carries, the most yards, the most touchdowns, but that's not to undermine Montgomery and the role that he plays. Like, he is very important to that Lions offense. Obviously, very good player, rushing for 230 times, 966 yards and 13 rushing touchdowns, averaging 4.2 yards per carry is what we project. Moving on to the wide receivers. Wide receiver 1, 2, and 3. Don't want to sound like a broken record, but we have Tim Patrick right now as a wide receiver 3. That could change with Isaac Tesloff. His ascension is a legitimate thing, but it is mainly the top two guys, 146 targets and 115 targets respectively for St. Brown and Williams. For St. Brown, 110 receptions, 1,200 yards, and 10 touchdowns. For Williams, he's that deep threat, 15.3 yards per reception, 8 receiving touchdowns, and 1,100 yards receiving, only off of 72 receptions. And then the tight end, Sam Laporta, these stats are kind of an in-between of the breakout rookie season that he had, and then last year, which was actually a pretty good season, but I think everybody's expectation was, oh, he's going to be way better than he was his rookie year. That kind of gives us an idea that maybe his rookie year was kind of his ceiling. Let's just say, for instance, last year was his floor. So let's find a good in-between, and these stats are an average of that. 77 receptions, 862 yards, and 8 receiving touchdowns. And to wrap up the video, we have record projections. I don't like to give just one record projection and say they're going to finish with this many wins and anything outside of that is completely wrong. I like to give a window, a floor versus a ceiling. Minimum, they're going to win this many games, maximum this many. And if we put up the graphic, Lions fans, do not get upset with me when I read off the floor, but 8 and 9 minimum is what I expect at the absolute worst, where they don't make the postseason, they don't win the division. This is given the injuries. Let's say McNeil with his ACL injury doesn't recover in time. He has a setback. Onwuzurike is out for the year. Offensive and defensive coordinators, they're changing, so it might take some time to adjust. Given all that, winning a base of 8 games with all that going on is actually pretty freaking good, and it says a lot about your team that you guys do have a good team. So I don't expect anything around 8 and 9. What I expect is 10 and 7. However, the ceiling is closer to the year that they had last year, 15 and 2, where they had the first round bye. They made the playoffs. They won the division. That's kind of in the ballpark for the ceiling this year. Where I expect is 10 and 7, where they still make the postseason. They still win the division because in my standings, I had them tying with the Packers and they earned that tiebreaker over the Packers. I still have them having a pretty solid year. Playoff team, can contend for a Super Bowl. However, last year and the success that they had, that might be more of a ceiling for the Lions. But if you have any sort of agreements or disagreements, leave a comment down below. I'd love to chat with you guys. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date when we come out with a new video in this 32-day series. Tomorrow, I got a good buddy of mine joining us. His name is Larry Jomfy. He is a big Patriots fan. Post Tom Brady, sticking with it, so you know he's legit. He's going to be joining us to talk about the New England Patriots. With all that said, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I'll see you tomorrow.